Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow, and we are back here in the Hendrickson Library at the Center for the Preservation of Western Civilization at ITR World Headquarters here in Central Iowa. I got it out for you. I usually flub that. So anyway, we have a very special guest today. David Hoyt, did I get that right? Who's the Executive Director of School Boards for Academic Excellence.
That's right.
I did?
That's right.
Yeah, we're on a roll. Nowhere to go but down from here. Well, welcome to the ITR Live podcast. We got a really exciting announcement today of a new project here, and you're in town to help us get that launched, a big part of the project. And so who better to come in and kind of set the stage for all of this than you, and you're an expert on all of these things. So before we go any further, I think most of our listeners probably tuned in thinking I'd have some hot takes on the governor's race. I don't. That's for a future episode on the heels of Governor Reynolds announcing she would not run for re-election. Trust me, listeners, we're going to get to it. I promise. So bear with us because this is a big deal. It's a big release for us today. So, David, tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and just the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So I've been working in public policy for the last 19 years for different think tanks and activist organizations and worked on a whole host of different issues. But the one that always stood out to me as the most important, if you really want to change the direction of the country, is education, because there's nothing more important than what kids learn as far as determining our destiny as a country. And so I have worked off and on education reform for a while. Of course, on the right, broadly speaking, we're a nonpartisan organization, but a lot of people come from the political right who are involved in school boards right now and push the kinds of reforms that we support. Although, of course, we're happy to work with anybody. The main solution to education has been school choice for a long time, and school choice has really taken off. Iowa is certainly no exception. I think you guys are a leader with the Education Savings Account program. I was just talking to some of your colleagues about the open enrollment program. I think y'all have one of the better ones in the country on that as well. But there needs to be more than just school choice. And I say this as somebody who's a fan of school choice and a practitioner. I co-founded a charter school where I live in Florida, so I believe wholeheartedly in school choice. But as of right now, you still have 80 to 90% of kids that are in the public school system. Public schools aren't going anywhere. They're going to have to change in a school choice environment, but they're not going anywhere. And so School Boards for Academic Excellence was founded about a year and a half ago to solve that part of the equation. You know, groups like yours are doing amazing work with state legislators, and there's a long track record of policy successes that have come from that. But working in a similar capacity with school boards is a relatively new thing. And so I'm very excited about this tool you all have developed to do exactly that.
Yeah. And so that's great. So the tool that we're talking about, which we've actually officially launched today and sent it out. I know you're here. It did some work with the media, but is our ITR report card project. So our listeners are very familiar with ITR Local, which isn't just a website, but is a kind of a one-stop platform with all of the data about how things are going fiscally with their local government. ITR report card, I think, builds on that success in that platform, which is a new one for how things are going with at the school level, primarily with student achievement and spending. But give me your perspective on ITR report card, how an individual taxpayer or parent or school board member, which I know you how can they use that, or what can be learned from the information and the data on that platform?
Well, there's a tremendous amount of really useful stuff on there. And so one of the hardest questions to get at in education reform is an assessment of where things stand currently. Because you have your state assessments, you have the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is sort of like a nationwide test, and then you have individual schools and districts and grades, and you have all these different systems. But there's not a lot of resources looking across the country that compare apples to apples across school districts within a state. Because education is so local and varies so widely by state, it's really good to have that kind of information within one state. And so you've got the information that you need there to figure out, what percentage of kids are graduating on time, what percentage of them are literate by third grade, which there's a lot of research that shows if you can't read by third grade, you're going to be behind the curve for a really long time, and it's going to be really hard to catch up. And then looking at the percentage of instructional versus non-instructional spending, which is a key component of budget reform and keeping taxes under control. So those are the types of things that I think if you want to reform what's going on in a school district, it's very important to have those numbers ready at hand so that you can make an informed decision.
Right. I'm glad you made that point about every district is different. We've talked about that a lot, is that, I suspect this is the case in a lot of states, but, what drives things in, we're here in the Waukee School District, for example, high growth, a number of different factors, a very high property tax base from which to draw from here, as opposed to other parts in rural Iowa that don't have those advantages. And maybe there's other factors that play in it. So it's good to have this sort of snapshot from all over the place. I mean, just to give people an example of what's some of the data that's on here. I mean, you have a chart that looks very similar to what we have at ITR Local with spending and enrollment inflation, but graduation rate, ACT score, third grade English language arts scores, enrollment numbers, property tax revenue. And, it's a lot of data. I mean, we could have charts and charts and charts, right? We tried to put together what's the core things that people really need the most of and get it on there. But we're really proud of this in how it's depicted. And I know you talked about this morning when you came in here, when we were in the middle of our pre-production meeting where we are downstairs drinking coffee and talking about the day. But you're not in all the inside jokes. But now that you've been on the episode, you can get on that. But how does this compare? Are other states doing this, or I don't know? Speak to that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm practically part of the team now.
Yeah,
so
good. Well, you are good. We like it here.
So there are a couple other organizations that have started putting together data like this. I would say this, to me, is the most comprehensive and, in particular, the most visually usable. Like the data visualizations on here do a really good job of telling a story, because a number in and of itself doesn't necessarily lead to reform. A number is an inert thing, but when it's presented in this way, it's very easy to see, hey, my district is doing X, this district over here is doing Y. And you brought up the difference between rural and non-rural districts. And from talking to Sarah on your team, she mentioned that there are some rural districts where they have, pretty tight budgets, and yet they have really high literacy rates. I think she mentioned one that was as high as 96%. And it was in a very rural area. So, clearly there are areas that are doing things really well, and then there are areas that are doing things not so well. And, for my mind, I think this is arguably the best tool in the country right now that does this.
Well, see, you heard it there, folks. ITR is best in the country.
That's right.
I was trying to get you into that. But it is interesting. And we'll get back to that in a minute. But it really is. We try to make this stuff as usable as possible. And all of this data is pulled from public government official sources. We're not cooking the books. In fact, look, at our core, we are an organization about tax policy and fiscal policy, right? And it's not our intention to tell a story necessarily on graduation rate. That's your job. You do those things. But I think the bottom line is, are we getting the performance that the investment should dictate? I mean, it's over half of your property tax bill in Iowa goes towards public K-12 education or education in general. And I think a lot of Iowans, even fiscally conservative Iowans, are somewhat okay with that, but they want to get value and they want to feel like they're that investment, because time and again in Iowa, we have been told by bigger government advocates that if you just spend more money, instead of growing schools at 2%, you grow them at 4%, that is the solution to student achievement issues. And sometimes when we go a little deeper into the data, we realize, we could probably stretch these dollars a lot further. And I guess from my standpoint, maybe this is me personally, I'd like to see something like this trigger that idea and you work with individual school board members closely, I think, around the country. And so speak to your experience in working with legislators, or not legislators, that really showcases my perspective, but a school board member or even parents, of how do you how do you translate that into the political will to try and stretch those dollars further? I mean, is that too narrow of a question, or do you?
No, I think that's the right question. And, the thing is, one of the greatest impediments to reform is something we call the education establishment. There's something like an education deep state. And
that's can I use that?
Please do.
Okay,
Copyrighted.
I'm writing it down right now
with attribution. But no. But yeah. So the education deep state there's a coalition of forces who are part of the education system. And my experience with most of these people is they're well-meaning.
Absolutely.
And, I say this as somebody who went to public schools. My mom was a public school teacher for over 20 years. And, there are a lot of people who are making less money than they could otherwise who are trying to make education better. So not at all to attack them. But within administration particularly, there's not going to be a lot of interest in trimming the fat on administrative teams. And that's why one of the things I love that you guys put on here is the percentage of instructional spending. So, yeah, looking at what's going on in other states, for instance, not too far from here, there is a school in Chicago where their per pupil spending is $35,000 per student. I think that's 3 times as much as I saw in some of these districts. And their their grade level reading percentage is 0. So clearly, there really is no correlation between spending and educational outcomes. I think everybody, like you said, we all want better education. And unfortunately, the solution that the education establishment typically rolls out is throw more money at the problem. And, the nature of bureaucrats being what they are, that's not going to translate directly into results.
Yeah. Because that's the what I guess I fight a lot is that idea is that it doesn't have to be one or the other. Yeah, and there are certain challenges that schools may have that require additional resources. I mean, we're not completely blind to that, but are we leveraging this as much as possible? So, so one thing, so I'm going to try and put myself in the shoes of Sarah Curry, who worked with you a lot on this project, and in pulling the data together and packaging it. And I guess I've lost my train of thought a little bit, but when she works with individual school board members and individual city council people and supervisors, but she will find and you said they're all well-intentioned. I think almost all of them are. I mean, there's ill-intentioned people in every walk of life, but they want to do better. They want to come in and they want to deliver the best education possible. But they also they care about, look, every school board member is a taxpayer generally, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm getting to the point here, but it seems to me that this would be really helpful if I'm one of those reform-minded school board candidates or a school board newly elected, because a lot of these things are the kinds of, here I'm getting back to the point, that Sarah will have worked with a local elected official, and I didn't know that. That there's this some of these basic charts on here are news to local electeds, and that is not an indictment of them at all, is to simply say that there's a lot of these basic facts that you put into this kind of format, and it can be an eye-opener. And so, we're really excited about the opportunity to just kind of create new opportunities for reform. And there's not a question there. I just, that occurred to me. Mainly, I'm still reeling from the education deep state comment because that is stuck in my mind. But tremendous opportunities to just start conversations. And maybe that you see, hey, our spending is here and our outcome is good here, but not here. What's the change? Then they can go and start asking the questions. And I guess at the end of the day, isn't that really what we're trying to get done? Is just get people to start asking the really hard questions about what's going on in their local schools.
100%. And, I think one of the things that is so useful about this tool is that the data is easily comprehensible, because the thing is, school boards get reports like this. And to your point about candidates and newly electeds, I think this is like gold for them. And if you're thinking about running for school board in Iowa, I would look at this first, because this is basically all your platform talking points right here.
Yeah.
You throw in a little bit of curriculum and some safety and discipline, you've pretty much got a platform.
Yep.
That's tailored to your local school district. So and the thing is, school districts have budgets. They have reports on all these things and academic outcomes. But the problem that I've seen, and this is across the country, is they're not presented that information in such a way that leads to a reform conversation. This is presented in such a way that you can see where the areas of improvement are. And then, they can certainly come to us or to you guys to have a more in-depth conversation about, okay, well, how do we increase our math scores and reading scores?
Yeah. One chart that you touched earlier on school choice and ESAs, and I just want to bring this up for folks that might be clicking through some of the data. Don't forget that there's some expandable menus at the bottom that you can get into. But one of them is open enrollment and educational savings accounts, and district by district. And I think this is really interesting because you've seen this all over the country when you had other states debating educational savings accounts, that it's rural legislators afraid that they're going to lose out. I mean, that is a common theme, and it was a theme in Iowa. But if you go in and look at some of these districts, you can see where is that actually, how are things changing? And a lot of these districts, the educational savings account enrollment, because we're year 2 into this project, don't really register compared to just the basic open enrollment. Mm-hmm. It is, these school districts are not losing or gaining students based on whether or not ESAs exist. It is just simply that raw open enrollment factor of whether people want to come in or out of the district. And they're all unique, which is going back to the point of every district is unique. For example, one of the districts that really has seen a big surge in ESAs is Western Dubuque, which is, as you would think, outside of the city of Dubuque. Doesn't mean a lot to you, but they've got a pretty robust Catholic school system up there. Okay, well, there's opportunities, there's room to grow, but the district also has a tremendous amount of open enrollment in as opposed to open enrollment out. So clearly there's something there that is still attractive to families. Another one I just pulled up is I pulled a small district up, Linville-Sully. Linville-Sully is getting a net almost 4-to-1 open enrollment in versus open enrollment out. And open enrollment in is still much bigger than what they're losing in ESA students. So it's really interesting to see that ESAs really isn't hitting these rural districts like they were told they would.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And so I'm not trying to drag you into an ESA conversation because I know it's not your deal, but it is. Those are the kinds of things that you can go back to on this platform, pull the data, and have an informed conversation about things. So,
absolutely. And Sarah mentioned Sarah Curry from your team, who you referred to, and she deserves 1,000,000% of the credit for this, and the ITR team does. I mean, we may have provided a little bit of information, but I mean, this is certainly all your work. But Sarah mentioned to me, that she saw one of these rural districts where she had heard from people from the area saying ESAs it's an unfair competition for us. And then she looked at the actual data here and saw that in that area, it was what you said. It was open enrollment that has caused a decline in enrollment. And the ESA participation rate down there was actually pretty small. And in rural areas, the thing is, you got to think with school choice, you have to have a provider.
Right.
In order for someone to take an ESA there. And there's a lot of times there's just generally not going to be much of that.
That's right. And so, again, I'm trying to talk about how awesome our platform is here. But they're facts, because the facts don't lie. Yeah. And a lot of times in these public policy debates, there's a lot of assertions made or guesses at things, and they get passed off as fact. Well, we've got facts now.
Exactly.
And we got facts on dollars and cents and performance and enrollment trends and all of it. So anyway, I think it's fantastic. Because we got you here, I mean, what else is in the conservative policy world, the free market arena? You were right. We hear a lot about ESAs, school choice broadly, but what else is out there in the arena of, and if I'm putting you on the spot and you don't have, that's fine, for reform at the public K-12 level? Because we've talked, and I guess I'm sorry, my questions are meandering, but we want to see a thriving, quality public education system. As I've said, I think too often we're trying to hold on to this legacy system and teach kids almost the way we did 100 years ago in this state, and it's not sustainable, even the way we maybe even taught them 40 or 50 years ago. But what's on the horizon? I mean, looking out ahead, what else is there?
Yeah, well, I think it's a critical question to ask, because one of the problems, and this is a self-criticism as somebody who's part of the public policy change process, is we have a tendency, I think, to get a big reform change and then declare victory and go home.
Yeah.
And school choice, as big as a fan as I am, is not equivalent to an effective education system. It's a step in the way to get there. And so there's a couple things on the horizon that I'm hoping school choice will provide that necessary competition to allow public school systems to adopt some of those best practices. But one that's already been going from state to state, including in Iowa, is passing requirements on science of reading. Mm-hmm. And, this has become an educational trend recently in response to a prior educational trend to get away from basic phonics, which to me is just unbelievable that people are going to sight words where you try to read a whole word instead of the actual letters. I mean, the development of phonics is like one of the most important thought technologies in the last 10,000 years.
Sight words. That is a phrase I hadn't, going back to my children being little. Thank you for bringing back that memory of working on kids with their sight words. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. And the thing is, these things are repudiated by research. They're on their face a bad idea, and yet they're still very popular, even in states that have science of reading requirements. And so it's up to the school district to make sure that the curriculum that they've adopted actually follows. And then there's also the professional development and the teaching materials. There's a lot that goes into actually changing those academic outcomes. But I think that's the next frontier. As these choice schools come out that are killing it with phonetics, especially the classical model schools, the public schools can learn something from them and steal all the best ideas. There's no reason that public schools can't be entrepreneurial and compete as well.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's been a core belief of mine is trying wherever possible to interject free market principles into education, frankly, wherever possible inside of government. And I understand that government's a little different sometimes, but delivery of services, if we can find that free market principles that encourages the marketplace of ideas and competition for dollars and all of those things, I think we end up better for it because of all that. So that's really exciting. Well, anything else you want to share with the listeners today, or I don't want to cut you off too soon, but
no, not
you're
at
here
all.
to help us kick this project off, and I think we've had a great day doing it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate being involved with you guys and collaborating with you all, and I just say, like you said, the tool I think is something that should be of interest, certainly to school board members, because this is the most comprehensive and succinct presentation of this critical data that, frankly, in my experience, across the country, they're not getting from their administration oftentimes. But well, as parents, if I were a parent in Iowa, that's the first thing I would do is go see where is our school district at. And then, if you want to go to a school board meeting or something like that, or engage through ITR, now you can have a well-informed conversation about where we're at.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, we're really excited. The website is itrreportcard.org. It's going to be linked to any of our other websites, whether you're at taxrelief.org or ITR Foundation, ITR Local. It's all going to point back here, and it should be in a very familiar format, easy to read. And so thank you for the partnership on this. I know we couldn't have done it without you. Sarah has really enjoyed working with you on this project, and the rest of our team here. And I know that the team that also worked on it probably don't want to get mentioned by name, but we have had, the back end. There's been a lot of development work on this. So we're here. We're ready to answer any questions about the data. Actually, Sarah is. We can speak for her, so I'm just going to have her field all those questions. But on education policy, I know that you and your team are more than happy to help, and hopefully we can just spark that many more conversations here in Iowa. So thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, listeners. Again, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Tell your friends. And with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.